Hey, look, somebody asked me a question. I better answer it.
Hey, it's Aaron from AaronOnAutos.com again. Uh, this time I have a question from Christopher. I have to look because I'm making sure I give the right person. I have a lot of these questions. Anyway, Christopher's is very good because it is a question about the current automotive market, what's happening right now in automotive that a lot of people might be confused by. What he wants to know is what has contributed to the rise of the SUV, causing many car companies to discontinue passenger cars. So for those who aren't aware, because you're under a rock somewhere maybe, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, and now Chevrolet have pretty much walked away from the sedan and car market. So with the exception of a couple of models like the Mustang, the Camaro, and a couple of others, they are totally done making cars. They are now making crossovers, SUVs, and trucks. And so this is a very relevant question because it's confusing to people. Why aren't they making cars anymore? What's going on, right? Well, despite the fact that the number 2 best-selling vehicle in the United States is the Toyota Camry, so is a sedan, despite that fact, most car models, including that Camry, their sales are dying. They've been on for a few years, since basically the right after the economic issues. I don't know what word to use. Crash, is that something? I don't know. Anyway, the 2008 stuff and on. Right after that, car sales started dipping. Now everything else was dipping at the same time. So because they were on this, they were on a similar curve, people didn't really notice right away. But shortly after that, when the automotive market took off again, they realized that cars were not taking off at the same level. They were still kind of languishing. And it's continued. They've kept dropping. And that means that it tells you that consumers are not buying cars. Consumers are just not interested in them. So the reasons, there are a lot of them, but they're different than what people might think. A lot of people they like to put out these kind of quasi-conspiracy ideas that, they make more money on these crossovers, so they're not making cars anymore because they don't make money on those. It's all big industry ripping us off. The reality is that it's a combination of cultural change, technology changes, marketing, and buyer needs. That last one and the first one go together. So cultural changes and buyer needs are very, very intertwined in this market. Culturally, Americans are not really interested in small cars. We don't buy them. They don't sell well here. We've never really been that interested in them. They do have a market, but it's pretty small compared to the overall automotive market. And it's always been that way, and it's probably not going to change. Unlike Europeans, we're always compared to Europe. And I don't know why, other than, you could think of some racist reasons, right? But I don't know why we're compared to Europe all the time, because we're nothing like them. Europe is tiny, right? You can fit all of Europe in like Texas or something. Like, we are way bigger than Europe. America's huge. We're more spread out. We have longer distances. Our average daily drive is far longer than it is in Europe. There are a lot of things that in automotive, we are not comparable to them at all. We prefer, and because of our situation, because we drive longer distances, we tend to have larger families. We tend to have more, for all of these reasons, we tend to have more stuff. Have to say that. We prefer bigger, more comfortable, and more spacious vehicles. That's the American thing. And culturally, we've also been conditioned to believe that bigger is safer. So a bigger, heavier, larger vehicle is safer. That's mostly true, but it's only true if the accident involves a bigger vehicle versus a smaller one. Right? Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily work out that way. But larger is safer. That's a general truism in our culture. And technology has changed. So we have a different view of technology now. Technology has gotten to the point where a 7-seat crossover SUV that has huge amounts of room. It can have the same fuel efficiency that a sedan from the 1970s did. So when the oil crunch was happening and everybody was figuring out how to make cars much more fuel efficient really, really quickly, the fuel economy went up really fast right about that point. And yet we have huge vehicles that are bigger, heavier, and everything than those before that are more fuel efficient now. The average fuel economy for a big 7-seat is in the mid-20s now. So you can push 30 miles to the gallon in a 7-seat crossover at this point. And that's a huge thing. It doesn't sound like a lot when you're thinking about, like a 53 mile an hour Prius, but a Prius is tiny, and this is a huge vehicle with a lot of capability. And in the real world, my own testing has shown that those EPA numbers are generally right. You can get those without a whole lot of finagling. You don't have to be like a hypermiler to make it happen. Marketing has changed too. So vehicle manufacturers have a much better idea of what sells. They're fine-tuning and refining that constantly. Otherwise, they go out of business. So originally, sport utilities came around as basically trucks with a bed cover, right? So they had like a permanent bed cover, otherwise it's a truck. That evolved into, they became replacements for minivans, because minivans got this bad, you're the life is over, midlife, whatever, suburbanite, you're, boring, blah, blah. And the crossover took over for that. Crossovers also offer the things that people like about trucks. They offer the higher seating position, better visibility, more feeling of protection, and better interiors. Because they're not truck-based anymore, they have much bigger interior space, all of that. And they became a replacement for minivans, which in turn had become a replacement for station wagons. And as that kept going, the marketing kept going along with that. And now if you look at an automaker like, say, Ford or Chevrolet or Nissan, any of them, you look at Toyota, all of them, you look at their model lineup, and what you realize is they make a lot of vehicles that are not all-purpose. So in other words, they don't make like a vehicle that seems to fit everybody in some way. They make vehicles that fit specific segments along the way. And they're more than willing to split things up. So they're more than willing, like Honda came out with a Passport. I just drove that and we'll be doing a review soon. The Honda Passport is sort of between the Pilot and the CR-V in size, and it's kind of a mixture of the two, but it's hitting a very specific segment that is slightly, people that are, the CR-V is slightly too small, and the Pilot is a little too big. You're seeing a lot of that. Ford has the EcoSport. They have this long lineup of vehicles that hit very specific market niches. And then Ford is specialized in changing around the powertrains. So now they can hit niches within the niche, right? So now you can hit all these. Automakers are getting very good at that. And people are buying crossovers. So that's what they're going to. So, basically that's the reasoning for crossovers being the fastest growing segment, and for cars, to just generalize, sedans and so forth, to be dying off. It's cultural, it's about buyer wants and needs, it's about marketing, and it's about technology. The technology has gotten to the point where you can have the same fuel economy in that bigger crossover SUV with all-wheel drive if you want. And that, by the way, is a reason that a lot of sedans are now suddenly being offered with all-wheel drive as a way to keep them competitive. So there you go. That's the big reason. It's not because, big car companies trying to rip us off. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It has everything to do with we in our culture here in the U.S., we expect bigger and more comfortable, and you can't do that realistically with a car. So we move into bigger vehicles. So there you go. That's what I got. So if you have a question you want to ask, you can hit me up down below. You can find me on Aaron on Autos up there. You can find me on the Quora, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, Instagram. I don't know how you can ask a question on Instagram, but hey, find me if you want. It's Aaron Turpin. I'll just put my name because I don't use Aaron on Autos on most things. But there you go. So if you have a question, ask it. I got one more of these to do today, and then see you again next week.